Hello, welcome back to the Talking Points podcast. You're joined by myself and Tomo today. If you're watching us on YouTube, hello to you guys. You can see our beautiful faces. But if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or any audio platform, hello, make sure you give us a follow, rate us 5 stars. And today, we're going to be breaking down the Hungarian Grand Prix. But before we get into that, there's been some really big news. I woke up this morning, as always, because I'm really bad. I checked my phone as soon as I woke up. I see on Twitter, Fernando Alonso joins Aston Martin. I had to check the account and make sure it was a real account because I was like, surely this is a scam. This is somebody trying to trip everyone up. But it's real. Fernando Alonso's going to Aston Martin. Tomo, what do you think?
Reaction. Look, I mean, Hannah sent me a WhatsApp with a print screen and I was like, that's fake. Like, it's definitely fake. And I went on Twitter and I saw it. I was like, nah, they've been hacked. They've definitely been hacked. It was only when I clicked through and you go onto the official Aston Martin website, that's the point I believed it. And man, out of nowhere, I think, you know, we've always thought kind of since Seb announced his retirement, you know, were Aston Martin going to do a like for like, you know, another big name in that seat? You know, there's a lot of questions. You know, was he pushed out of Alpine with Piastri waiting in the wings? And, you know, that's something I felt earlier on in the season that, you know, no matter how well Fernando drives, Alpine have got to think long term and they can't afford to lose Piastri. So if they're going to lose one of their drivers, even though I think Alonso's driven at a better level than Ocon so far this season, it obviously makes sense to replace the 41-year-old. Let's be real, because as much as this man is a freak of nature, Fernando Alonso, he's still driving at this level at 41, which is insane. He can't go on forever. Question is how long? He's got a multi-year deal at Aston Martin, so it's at least 2 years. And, I mean, I still don't really know what to make of it, to be honest, mate. Like, because I could just imagine Lawrence Stroll and Fernando Alonso butting heads, but I don't know. I'm not sure if that approach is the right one. I don't know.
I think there's 3 options that sort of come into it. It's like, the first one is, they've been pushed out because Alpine want Oscar Piastri, so Alonso's been pushed out. The other one is Alonso looking into, because I feel like he likes to do this. He sees projects and he just kind of believes in them, like the McLaren Honda project where they were like, we're going to be back to the Senna Prost days. And then that all failed. And obviously there is a lot of hype still about Aston Martin. Whilst we look at it now and we're like, are you sure? But there is still a lot of hype with a new campus and the projects that they've got and the money that they've got, that they could potentially become a team that can fight for the top. And Alonso, you know, Alpine have kind of stagnated the last 2 years as well. Like, does he want to... He always likes to just give new projects. He said something in the media recently, and I think it was on regards of Vettel's retirement. And like obviously him going off to like be with his family more and want to do other projects. And Alonso was just like, well, I mean, I'm however old I am, and I don't have a family, I don't have any commitments, so I'm here until I win that 3rd championship. So we're probably going to see Alonso in, you know, some other team when he's 90, still driving around and still being at the same level.
I just wonder, like, Fernando said a lot as well that he wants to, and he said in the statement joining Aston Martin, he wants to win races again, and that really motivates him. I do wonder, you know, how long Aston Martin are going to need to get to that level, because it's all well and good, you know, the facilities won't be finished till January, then you've got to get everyone in, you've got to get everyone adjusted, then they've got to... Because, to be fair, they've had 2 good races on the spin, you know, on the cusp, both cars on the cusp of points, 2 races in a row. So I think, you know, there is something there. They're not on the level of Alpine yet. Like you say, I think the ambition that Lawrence Stroll has, especially with his son in the team, he is more invested than your typical team owner would be. Like, he's going to be prepared to throw money at that team, even if it's not financially viable anymore, both for his son and for Aston Martin Lagonda, the car brand, because that's struggling at the minute. My share price isn't doing very well right now, Hayden, so I'm a bit down on that. I just think that I was interested to see if they were going to do a like for like, and they do seem to have done that. You know, how long has it been known about Seb retiring? How quickly this has happened has really surprised me. Yeah. And I mean, listen, I hope it works out for Fernando. I hope it works out for Aston Martin for sure. But obviously your boy Lance, I think, you know, he's going to be learning from another incredibly talented, experienced teammate, which I think can only help his development.
0 next season in qualifying.
I mean, look, I hate to say it, man, but I mean, Fernando's always been absolute shit hot in quali.
So I'm just happy Lance showed up showed up to qualifying this weekend. So that's his one this season that he showed up to. But I
did.
think cast your mind back as well. Quite a few weeks ago, there was that rumour of one driver leaving a team, another driver replacing. The driver leaving wasn't the shock, but the driver going to that team was the shock. Now, I'm wondering whether they were talking about this because it was a Spanish reporter. Now, was the rumour that Vettel was going to go somewhere else originally?
I remember that.
And then he changed his mind and was just like, "Do you know what, actually, I don't want..." Maybe Aston Martin was like pushing Vettel out the door, wanting Alonso. And instead of Vettel going, "Oh, I can go here, I can go here, I can go here," he's like, "Do you know what, actually, I'm done with the sport. I want to go and do other things." So maybe it's sort of changed. So maybe it was that rumour has come round. And yeah, now Alonso's in there. But who do we see replacing? I think for me, it's an obvious one. It's Oscar Piastri's going to go straight in. My girlfriend Fem says it's going to be Daniel Ricciardo going back. I think, you just got to stop dreaming. At some point, you've just got to, yeah, exactly. So I think it's the obvious choice that Oscar Piastri is going to go there.
Oh, yeah, I mean, this surely all but confirms it, right? Like, given all of the noise that they've made. And also, there was a lot of talk of Piastri potentially replacing Latifi at Williams. Obviously, I think this makes a lot of, like, now that it's happened, I'm surprised. But I think the fact that Alonso's been prepared to go to Aston Martin, I think Piastri at Alpine makes a lot of sense. I think he had to be in a seat, and it wouldn't have made a lot of sense for me to him to go to another team. But then also, from Williams' point of view, I think this gives, they can... Because I think, actually, Nicky's performances, and we'll get into it, I think they've been quite a bit better these last couple of races than the start of the season. CA does for the rest of the year. Logan Sargent's, had some peaks. He didn't have a great weekend in Hungary. See how he can perform for the rest of the F2 season, and then potentially, a Sargent Albon, because Sargent's already part of that academy.
Yeah,
maybe that could work out for him. Maybe if it doesn't, maybe they snag a Drogovic. I don't know. But again, I said this when it was announced that Seb was retiring. This kicks off silly season, and it's all manifested very, very quickly. I wasn't expecting things to come. We're expecting Porsche Red Bull news later this week as well, potentially, if those court documents are to be believed, on Thursday maybe. So, yeah, there's a lot of exciting summer stuff coming up, mate. But I wasn't expecting this at all. Not at all.
I was just expecting Hülkenberg into Aston Martin, job done, and it's pretty simple. And yeah, it's kind of... It could throw a spanner into works. Like, there's no saying that, someone else does go to Renault and Alpine get Oscar Piastri a seat in McLaren. It could happen. I think it's more likely that Piastri is going to go to Alpine and stay there with the team, because it just makes most sense. And it kind of ends silly season there, and it just sort of leaves the final seat, I think, with Williams, because I think I can see a lot of the other drivers being secure where they are. Maybe Zhou, because the whole talk of, even though I think he's done a really good job for his rookie season, there was still that talk at the start of the season that he's coming in, he's bringing money, and then Pourchaire is going to go into that seat if he has a good F2 season. So that could be the other one that's under, we'll have to wait and see for that one. But I still think Zhou is worthy of keeping that seat, the job that he's done this season. But yeah, I guess we'll just have to wait and see if anything else kicks off over the summer. But I think the Williams one will be last minute, because there's no other drivers in the market. I think it's just going to be an F2 driver, or Hülkenberg goes to them. That's the only other option of an experienced driver to go back, isn't it?
I think Williams can take their time, can't they? I don't think they're in any particular rush. They can get Latifi. I think Latifi was always going to see out the season anyway. So I think, just see out the season, then they can reevaluate options based off who wins F2. Because, like you say, Pourchaire, maybe there's a Pourchaire deal. If he does a much better job than Sargent, maybe there's a deal there where Alfa Romeo want to get Pourchaire in a seat and give him to Williams, who are probably the worst team at the minute as well, so not as much of a competitor. So yeah, I think Williams could just play it by ear, can't they?
Yeah, they can wait and see. Right, let's get into the Hungarian Grand Prix then. Let's start off with the qualifying session. I want to put it back to Q2, because one thing that stuck out to me in Q2 was Sergio Perez getting his lap invalidated and then getting it given back once they saw the replay cams. Now, we've talked a lot about track limits, and I believe that it's the right thing to do, that if you go over the white line, you get it invalidated. That's fine. That's completely fair. But it needs to be policed properly. And here, it just goes to show that they need to come up with a system. I know that maybe I'm looking into it a bit more because I play the game a lot and it's quite easy. You run wide. It's quite obvious that you've run wide because there's sensors in a game, because it is a game. and if you gain time, you get a warning or a penalty. Obviously, that's a game. The infrastructure that they would have to put into all these tracks would be massive, where they'd have sensors all around the white lines. But there is some sort of technology that does need to come into it to make it easier on these guys. Because I think it actually properly screwed up Sergio. Because he got his first lap invalidated. He had to then go back out in the middle of the session, and it didn't work for him. And then he went back out at the end, wasting tyres. And that's just something that you don't need as a driver. And I think it ruined him big time.
It interrupted his flow, didn't it? I think flows, and you've got a plan in place when you go into qualifying, and just interrupting that really kind of threw him off. And you got to wonder, like, if you're going to delete someone's lap time in qualifying, surely you have to be pretty sure that they've extended. And again, when we all saw the evidence on TV, and we were like, hang on, he's not gone over it, like, he's not gone fully over the line there, it's fine. And yes, they made the right call by reversing the decision for sure. But like you said, I think the damage was already done, and especially with Max, having his problems in Q3, it wasn't looking particularly good for Red Bull prior to the race anyway. Because I think, like you say, the technology exists, no doubt in my mind. It exists. I'm pretty sure they've got some kind of automatic track limits detection system at Brands Hatch. The technology exists that it can be done, because it is you're either over the line or you're not. And I don't see why something can't be implemented and then it just takes any of the. It's like no one questions goal line technology in football. It's either over or it isn't. You can complain about it, but if the ref doesn't get the call onto their little phone, then it's not a goal, and it should just be like that in F1 as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Then we move on to Q3. You've mentioned it. Max Verstappen problems in qualifying, which was a big shame. I was quite happy for one reason, that I knew it was going to make an exciting race. I knew that Max Verstappen was going to come back through, and Sergio Perez, both of them at the back of the field, coming through, because Hungary's can be a good race, or it can be a bit of a stale one, because it's notoriously known for being hard to overtake Monaco without the barriers. So to see Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez working up through the field, that was going to be exciting. What he could have done in qualifying, it's just a shame, because he mucked up the first lap, and then just didn't have a chance. But our boy, British bias, George Russell, I was so gassed. We were watching it. Science was on pole. I was watching it with the missus, and she was just like, okay, well, there we go. That's not bad from Science. And she was on a 10-second delay, and I'm just like this. As soon as it goes, I'm like not saying anything for 10 seconds. And then she looks at me and just like, oh, just sort of came out of nowhere. But realistically, they did have good pace over the weekend.
Yeah, I mean, again, both of Russell's Q3 laps, his first one on used softs, and then his final one that put him on pole, both were quicker than Leclerc's 2 laps in Q3. So it wasn't just a one-off. Literally, Sainz crossed the finish line. And I, beforehand, I was very much I feel like Sainz is going to out-qualify Leclerc. I think he's been stronger so far in the weekend. And he did. I literally just tweeted, Sainz baby, because I was just like, Sainz on pole, buzzing. And then because George didn't set a single purple sector either, so it kind of lulled us into a full sense of security. You could see, when I watched it back afterwards, you could see George was 1.5 tenths up, I think, going into or out of sector 2, I think, because Carlos messed up the middle sector. He had a wiggle, that was his yellow one.
Turn 6.
Exactly, which obviously would have cost him in the end. But man, I was like, gas for George. And more than that, I think just... it's good to now see this 2-car fight seemingly become a 3-car one. George has come out and named, Ferrari and Red Bull as the ones with the flexi floors, apparently. So we'll see for Spa, because obviously they're going to be new floors for Red Bull and Ferrari. I mean, Lewis is excited for the rest of this season as well, because that Mercedes does clearly have... the race pace has been good, and they've been consistent. They haven't been breaking down. They've been just racking up the points, and they've not had the quickest package, but it's seemingly getting there. Qualifying was always the Achilles heel, but I mean, going off these last couple of weekends, they're in a much stronger position now in qualifying, which bodes well for the rest of the season. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. It would be interesting to see what Hamilton could have done, because then it would be good to see where the car was without the DRS issues, because he set his first lap on used tyres, and then, of course, the DRS failure on the second push lap. So, I still think probably George would have got it. I think that, though, Hamilton could have been closer to the Sainz and Leclerc, just
at
sort
least
of around
fourth.
that area. Yeah. So
At
I
least
think
fourth.
it would have been exciting to see how good. Right, let's move on to the race. The race kicked off. Wasn't too much going on the front. George just kind of held it off the line. But there was a big fight between Ocon and Alonso. Like Ocon really squeezing Alonso against the wall. And not only is that the only time we've seen it in that race, but then also when Alonso came out of the pits and they were side by side together, held each other up, fight each other too hard, and actually allowed Daniel Ricciardo with,
that was a move and a half.
A very, very good move.
that was an absolute move and a half. You know what? Alonso wasn't alongside. It's one of them, to be honest. I feel like it was just about okay for me, that first lap. There was later in the lap where Ocon did Alonso had to go off track. It's after that kind of quick right-hander. I can't remember, I don't know, call the names. And that maybe was a little bit over. Like, I think he could have given him... Honestly, on that start-finish straight, I wasn't too offended by what I saw. Like, I think it was just about... And there's been a few times, like, Saudi Arabia, wasn't it, earlier in the year, when it was just kind of on the cusp of not being okay. And, there's clearly a good relationship there, but I think, Ocon is prepared to very much, force the issue. We saw that when he was teammates with Checo Perez. I'm not being funny, at Force India as well. So he does have a bit of a reputation for not giving teammates maybe quite as much room as you should give a teammate. But I do think yesterday it was just okay. But any more, and it would be naughty step for Esteban. But I was all right with it, personally.
I think the problem comes from is just that both incidents, they lost positions at the start because they were fighting so much on the inside. It just allowed Hamilton an easy overtake on both of them. I don't know if Verstappen got them as well. I think Verstappen just got the Alfa and the McLaren off the line and then had to get through. Yeah, he had to get through the Alpines a little bit later. But
he did,
it definitely allowed the easy overtake for Lewis, and then later on,
which is a fair point,
for Daniel Ricciardo. So it's something that just does, I think, need to be looked at, because those guys, they do like fighting each other and they do enjoy the battles with each other. But for sometimes when you lose out a position from it, it's like, come on now.
From like a racing enjoyment point of view, I've really enjoyed like him scrapping with Fernando. But yeah, from a team point of view, it's not really what you should be doing. So I get that point. But yeah, ultimately, and I think Fernando knows that Esteban doesn't give him too much space, and he's right to kind of criticise it. Look, it's similar to when we've talked in the past about your boy Lance and Sebastian, be that at Russia last year or be that like last weekend and Italy, and there's been, we want to see good racing between, but you've also got to understand that it is a team sport first and foremost, and you have to maximise that result. And look, I've enjoyed these scraps, and sometimes I think when you're playing with such fine margins, it's fine if you're against other drivers from other teams, like the Leclerc move on Russell, which I'm sure we'll talk about a bit, which was insane. Very tight margins there. Yeah. But when it's against your teammate, come on.
Yeah, definitely. They didn't make contact, though. There was someone who did make contact at the start, and that was Mr. Alexander Albon pile driving into the side, torpedoing Sebastian Vettel.
To be honest, I've only seen one angle, and it looked like a racing incident to me, and it wasn't penalised. So I'm going to ignore you. That's what I'm going to do. All right, my boy's perfect. He never does anything wrong.
Should we move on quickly from that one then?
Go on then. I want to see some more angles. Okay, I can't really evaluate, but ultimately, that kind of ruined Alex's race.
Similar to maybe like the Ricciardo Stroll one, where it was just a little bit of understeer on the inside. The grip there, the first lap, it's just a collision that happened between two drivers. I don't know how lucky Vettel got away with it with the damage, because I know Albon obviously didn't. He had to pit and he had to, resurrect his front wing.
Your front wing.
Yeah, and then Vettel, I don't know, because Stroll definitely had problems at the end because he had the collision, but Vettel was a lot faster as well. So I'm not too sure on the damage on either cars there. But
there was a few, because I think Latifi I think had a bit of damage, and I know K-Mag obviously he got the black and orange flag, didn't he, for coming in as well. So there were a few little kind of scraps in that first kind of couple of laps, but nothing that ended anyone's race. We almost got, which haven't there only been like 8 races of all time where no one's DNF'd, and we got almost all the way to the end when Bottas's car conked out. So we're almost
so close,
so
close. Right, let's get back to the racing then, and it was just more sort of, there was the Red Bulls coming back through, Hamilton working his way through as well. And then you kind of had a stagnated position where Russell was just sort of leading for a bit. Then the Ferraris started to put a bit of pressure, and then the Ferraris became Ferrari, and the tactics came out to play. And look, I'm always happy to defend people. Okay, I just like to defend. I like to give people.
That's a very broad statement, Hayden.
I like to give people the benefit of the doubt a lot of the time, and I've been doing it on recently on this podcast. And today, there's just nothing to defend. Like, I can understand that maybe they were reacting to Verstappen, but it was just like Red Bull just pulled their pants down. It was like, oh, we know how to manipulate you, so we're going to make you do this, and they just screwed themselves up. Especially like putting Leclerc on the hards at the end, like. Clearly, they're just not watching the race, because they would have seen Alpine on the hards and dropping way down from the position to the point that Aston Martin were attacking Alpine in that race because they were on the hards. So they decided to react to what Verstappen was doing, and instead of just like going later and maybe going for, because they had to use a soft or a hard because they just used the mediums at that point. Yeah. So I understand they had to use one of the tyres.
But Leclerc was happy. He was happy on the medium.
Later. I don't understand
Right, this perfectly encapsulates the difference between Red Bull from a team strategy point of view and Ferrari. Because Christian Horner was saying after, the plan for Red Bull was to start on the hard tyre, and then when the Checo and Max went out on their reconnaissance lap, couldn't get any temperature even in the softs, they changed their minds. And they switched, and they listened to the drivers, even though all the data was telling them that you should start on the hard tyre. That's the best tyre to start on for Red Bull, coming from the kind of midfield.
Yeah,
they listened to their drivers. And that's the thing. You can have all the data in the world, but you need to know when to listen to your drivers and trust their judgment. And we've seen so many times where, particularly it's felt like Carlos has been like, oh, like, this is wrong, we should be doing this, and he's been proved to be correct. And in this instance, Charles Leclerc sitting there on mediums, yes, Max is behind it, but he's like, I'm comfortable on this tyre, like, I can take this tyre a lot longer, maybe pit onto softs later on and do something. Because, I think, granted, like, I think in the race, Red Bull definitely did unlock some pace, but for neither Ferrari to even be on a podium is insane. Because, okay, maybe Sainz didn't have the pace in the race, and maybe because his strategy, he never put the hard tyre on, and his strategy kind of more mirrored like the Mercedes. And look, he finished behind both, and fair enough, but there's no way Leclerc shouldn't be on the podium given the pace he was demonstrating in that race on that medium tyre. Ferrari have to, like, Matteo Binotto, you know what, like, I know it's your job to defend the team, but when it's so flagrant and it's so obvious that you've massively cocked up, everyone can see it. The drivers from other teams are laughing at you in the cool-down room because you put hard tyres on. Like, sometimes you've just got to, like, you put your hands up and admit there's been a mistake, but changes need to be made, mate, because it keeps happening. It's a meme for a reason, man. I'm sick of it.
It's just ruined this season, in all fairness, because people will look back in years to come and be like, oh yeah, 2022, that was the year that Max just dominated. And the cars are very similar. In fact, I was speaking to Brake, who goes through all the, all the data and all that stuff. He was saying, actually, in all fairness, Ferrari has faster race pace than the Red Bull car. So not only is Ferrari faster, but they're 100 points off. They're nearly about to be jumped by Mercedes, who have been nowhere for the half of the season. So you've just got to be I know there's been reliability issues and there's been driver DNFs, but that's the problem. You're going up against Red Bull, who strategically have been on it. I'm gonna say they've been on it because the people they've gone up against have been, they don't know what strategy is. They don't even know what strategy is. They don't know how to spell strategy. Yeah. So it looks like Red Bull, their strategy have been amazing throughout the season, and I will say that as well. I think their strategy's been on point. But also going up against Max Verstappen, who I've been saying to so many people before this race weekend. I was chatting to a streamer who was having a discussion about Leclerc versus Max, and I was just like, I don't think Leclerc's ready to fight, but he's not ready to win a championship because he's been making mistakes this season. You're going up against Max Verstappen, who just doesn't make mistakes. And he, I jinxed him. He actually made a mistake in this race. But if you're going to do a spin and only lose 2 seconds to your rival and then still be overtaken, and that's your only mistake of the season, then you are just on another level. Like, if you're going up against Max Verstappen, you have to be perfect. And that's where Ferrari are just going to lose the championship. Like, they've already lost, in my opinion.
That's the thing. I think it has been a combination. There's been the driver errors from Carlos, spinning out in Australia into the gravel. They've, I think we've seen these kind of errors, occasional errors from Leclerc and Sainz. I think the team letting them down has been a much bigger component in why they're not closer, for sure. And look, I don't want to sit here and just... Because I think we need to give credit where credit is due. I think Mattia Binotto has done a fantastic job in creating this Ferrari car that, again, I don't disagree with Brake's point. I think that, you look over the course of the season, I would say probably the Ferrari has been the better overall package. They might not have been able to convert all their pole positions, but I think overall they have produced a fantastic car, clearly. They've produced a howitzer of an engine, which will blow up every now and then, but that is the right strategy to take because they can bring reliability upgrades to the engines. They can't bring performance upgrades until the end of 2025, so it makes sense to do that. I get that, and I think you can excuse those things, but when it's the irony, people like to call Max Verstappen human error champion, right? It's human error that is constantly stealing Ferrari opportunity to win from themselves, and it's just when it keeps happening, you can excuse it when it's a one-off because, everyone makes mistake. No team is perfect. But at the end of the day, when it's so often and it's so clear, and it's like when they stick them hard tyres on, everyone, the commentators, the other teams, us, like, I'm like, what are they doing? Like, no one's got any pace on the hard tyres. Why are you doing this? He's happy on the mediums. Let him go. And it's just, it's such a... It really shows. This really shows how, we're always looking at the sport from an individual driver point of view. Who's the greatest of all time? Who won this World Driver Champion? You don't typically look at who won the Constructors, right? Mm-hmm. Ferrari won the Constructors in 2008 when Lewis won his debut title. No one cares that Ferrari won the Constructors in 2008. Let's be real. But it's a team sport. You need that team component, and Red Bull make this stuff look easy because they're such a well-drilled, well-operated team. Same for Mercedes. They've been improving at a rapid rate. You look at where they've started, where they are now. They've had the biggest jump up for sure in performance. And, it's the stuff that doesn't make the headlines. It's easy to... When things don't go wrong, it's very easy to notice it and jump on it. But just making the basics go right and pulling just solid, good strategies consistently is something that Red Bull... So... You could argue that maybe Charles isn't ready to fight for a title, but I think Ferrari as a team definitely aren't ready to fight for a title.
Well, Red Bull just sort of laugh at them, I think, these days. They don't respect them as a champion. Like, the pettiness from last year, it was back and forth between Red Bull and Mercedes because they both fear each other. They both know what each other can do. Whereas with Red Bull and Ferrari, it's just like, it's good to see you in the paddock, how are things going, like friendly vibes, because it's just like, we know you're going to fuck this up somehow, and if you do beat us, it's going to be 1 in 4 races, so we're all fine. So, yeah, it's just becoming that stage. And, like, looking back, I just don't think... Leclerc just needs to, at this stage, if Ferrari can't pull it out the bag, that message from Sebastian Vettel is becoming clear. Do not waste your talent. And he is at the moment in Ferrari. Yes, okay, this is a good opportunity for him to learn and iron out those mistakes that he's been making. But Ferrari, can they improve? They just don't seem to be going in the right direction.
I think Ferrari need to... This is now, for me, the Drivers' Championship is gone. This is it now. Like even before this race, after qualifying, I was like, there's a chance. Oh yeah, Constructors as well. That's long gone. That's done. Ferrari just need now to use the rest of this season to test their engine, get the reliability fixes in for next year, get some new strategy. They need new personnel. I'm sorry, they just do. They need new personnel. The thing is, right, Mattia Binotto is a team principal. He's not like a Arriva Bene or a Toto Wolff or a Christian Horner. He comes from an incredibly technical background. He's worked at Ferrari for years. He's worked his way up through the engine division, and he's got that technical know-how. So it's no surprise that they've produced a fantastic racing car. But for this other stuff outside Mattia needs to recognise that this isn't good enough. And I'm sure he recognises it, but then he needs to enact some change. And if he can't, I don't understand why he's not enacted change earlier, to be honest. But something needs to give, because it can't carry on like this. It's ridiculous. The Tifosi deserve better. We, as fans, deserve better, because, it's just been so frustrating that they're there, but they're not. And it's just annoying, man.
It just feels like he needs someone alongside of him, kind of like the Toto Wolff Paddy Lowe days from Mercedes, where he can be that technical guy who's in charge of all the stuff to make the car the best it possibly can be, but he needs someone with maybe a pair of bollocks to shift things around and sort out the team to make them, in terms, like you say,
Braun Jean Todt.
Yeah, exactly.
Ferrari of the day.
That's how these great teams were made. Like Ferrari, in all fairness, historically, have never really been like an amazing team. I think because we look back at the Schumacher domination era, and it's like, Ferrari's one of the elites because of that. But that was because there was so many people involved. Like you say, Jean Todt, Ross Brawn, so many people involved in that team. You had Michael Schumacher, one of the best drivers ever. All those things coming together, and Ferrari just don't have that. In all fairness,
they hadn't won a title for 21 years before Schumacher won it in 2000. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. So, Ferrari done. Max Verstappen, though, I think one of his best drives, I think, in all fairness.
Yeah.
You came back from 10th on the grid. The first time, actually, he'd ever won outside the top four, which I didn't know. I'd assumed that, because he is a good overtaker. Yes, okay, I say he's a bit aggressive at times, but he is a good overtaker, and he can work his way through the field. But it's just like, to do that, and then also do a 360, and then re-overtake your rival.
Just for the flex.
And win by 7 seconds.
I know.
Is mad. And I think at the end he was probably just managing. Like, Lewis Hamilton was gaining on him, but I don't think he ever would have got him, because as soon as Lewis got close, he was going to turn up that wick. Because he pitted on those medium tyres quite early, would have been a little bit cautious to try and take them the distance. But would have just been, as soon as he knew that it was, okay, we just got Mercedes behind us, we've got, it was like 16-second gap to Lewis Hamilton. Cool, we can just manage this, keep it chill, and if they do get close, we can turn up the wick. And I think, one of the best drives I think Max Verstappen's had so far, and he's showing why he's worthy of last year's championship and this year's championship.
Yeah, I mean the guy's cut above at the minute for sure, and I think as well it was only the second time a Red Bull has won a race from outside the top six, starting outside the top six. So this set of circumstances doesn't happen often.
Yeah.
But I think it was, particularly, again, Hungary's difficult to overtake track. I think it kind of helped. You had, which is always nice to see, but it means it's a bit more difficult. Because I found this race quite difficult to follow because you had such a mixed tyre strategy at the start.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh yeah, but you're on soft, so maybe they'll be quicker at the end. And then you saw the Alpines put the hard tyres on and Magnussen put the hards on, and you think, oh, maybe that's going to work. And obviously it didn't. And then Charles... And it was difficult to follow, but that's where, again, Red Bull just made the right calls at the right times to get the undercuts when they needed them. To make, in terms of overtakes, Max didn't really have to work really hard. I can't really remember for any particular overtake. Not as hard as Charles had to work, I felt anyway. And they just put him on the track at the right place at the right time to use his talent to capitalise and win, like you say, by 7 seconds, having done a 360 pirouette just for the style points. I mean, surely, the title's done. Honestly, as much as Ferrari have cocked up as well, if Max Verstappen wins this championship and just carries on, which is looking like he will be a thoroughly worthy, and Red Bull will be a thoroughly worthy team to win it, no doubt. That's
the thing. Ferrari have fucked up quite a lot, but I still think Red Bull would be leading this championship regardless of all that, because it's just the pace that Max, he's now comfortable in this car. You can tell that with the gap difference between him and Sergio. The start of the season, it's a new car. Both of them were getting used to it. It was an even playing field. But now Max is starting to get used to what this car can do. And he's just, I'm not saying Sergio's got worse. I'm saying Max has got better. Max has just got better in this car. He's got more comfortable. He's just pushing away. And and that's the same as we go over to the next team, Mercedes. Lewis Hamilton has now started in the last 7 races. It's just been podiums for him. P3, 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 P2, P2. So I think it's like the last 5 or 6. And he's now comfortable in that car. I think between him and George Russell, it's still fairly even, but it looks like recently Lewis has kind of had a bit of the edge. And I think, again, it just
I'd
shows
agree with
that
that.
Lewis is another driver. Yeah, okay, I think last season there were a few mistakes that came in that were sort of, unforced errors. But this season, he's kind of ironed those out again. He's kind of, he always seems to switch it up in the second half of the season, that he kind of, starts to build it back up again. And he's one of 3 drivers I can think of on this grid that would just be, you can put him in one of the best cars and he can fight for the championship. Him, Max, and our man Fernando Alonso, as like the only 3 drivers who just don't seem to be making big errors. But yeah, great job from Lewis, like coming back again from 7th place, beating his teammate. And I wouldn't necessarily say George was on a bad strategy, because he didn't go. Did he go onto the hards? He went onto the mediums, didn't he? In the end?
Yeah, I think no. Yeah, George didn't go into that. I think where George was having to really push at the start and defend position, maybe that took a bit out of his tyres, because they seemed to kind of fall away towards the end. Whereas Lewis was able to drive a bit more of a. But even then, like Lewis, he was stuck behind Norris for a bit, wasn't he, as well? So I know Lewis thinks he could have maybe won if he'd have qualified, got the quali time in that he should have.
Yeah.
I still think Max probably wins that race just with the pace of that Red Bull. But yeah, I mean, Lewis, it was easy to jump on Lewis at the start of the season, and I know a lot of people did. Being like, oh, he's miles behind George, Lewis, blah, 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 blah. Like, I think it's clear now that obviously, Mercedes have much more of an understanding of their car now because of, I think, the sacrifices Lewis was taking at the start of the season, taking the more experimental setups. They're going to do that with the experienced driver, the driver they've got like 8 years of data on. Of course, they're going to do that with Lewis instead of the new guy that they don't have anywhere near as much. They're going to use Lewis for that job. They did, and it has paid off in terms of, again, the step up in performance of that Mercedes relative to the rest of the field. I feel like has been the biggest from start of the season to now 13 races in. And yeah, I mean, Lewis just has been driving it on rails these last few races, and yeah, it definitely has been, ahead of George, I think, ever so slightly. Overall, it's still, I think, the closest teammate battle on the grid. I think George has done an insane job, but Lewis is statistically the greatest of all time for a reason, and is still proving that like that talent hasn't gone anywhere.
It's 7 out of 6 now, isn't it? Between, I saw because you like to keep track.
7-6 to Russell.
7-6 to Russell. Yeah. But I think that's good for Mercedes, because they have a reliable car. It's not the quickest.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely not the quickest, but it's reliable that they're ready to pounce on it. And they have 2 drivers who I'd say are quite evenly matched and also both reliable. Like, George has probably made a few mistakes this year with the collisions with Sergio, but putting that to the side, they're both ready to pounce like today. 2-3. Like last time out in France, they also had a 2-3 ready to capitalise on the mistakes of the other teams. And that's why... If they can get this car sorted, they can't fight for the championship. They're too far back. But they can definitely start to, at the end of the year, start to just win the races like we have seen Mercedes do over the last 8 years. So, yeah, I think they definitely need to watch out for those teams. But, yeah, Max Verstappen, race winner. I think driver of the day as well was fantastic for me. And I think we should get into the head-to-heads. Between the teams. Let's start off with the Red Bull team. I mean, it's pretty simple. Max Verstappen, Sergio Perez, both had issues of their own in qualifying. So looking at the race, Max obviously comes back through. Sergio, I think he was doing a good job. He was following Max. Once Max made an overtake the next lap, Perez would make an overtake. Their strategies did kind of separate at some point in the race. And that kind of put Perez on the back foot quite a bit, because he finished, 15 seconds off of his teammate. I do think that Max has still stepped away. I don't think it was a bad job by Perez, but I think, Max just did an unbelievable job this weekend.
Yeah, it was unfortunate for Sergio in qualifying, partly on him, partly out of his hands as well. And I think at the end he was catching a fair rate of knots. I think if there'd have been maybe a handful more laps in that Grand Prix, you're maybe thinking he could have got a podium. He had more pace at the end. Yeah, that gap does seem to have opened up again. Early in the season, we felt like, again, when they were both learning the car, I think Checo's experience, really shone through. Not that Max, this is 8th season in Formula One, but, Checo's been around a long time, driven a lot of different types of cars, different generations of cars. And I think, that shone through now that they're starting to turn this, and it's a more oversteery car. I think that's the best way to set up these cars to be quick. Charles talked about this with the Ferrari as well. He would rather have a quick car that is oversteery if it is, on the edge, because I think you just need to be able to dance on that cusp of spinning to be the best and to hang with Max. And Max does that lap in, lap out, and typically doesn't make mistakes. He did make a mistake yesterday. How much can I hold that against him? Well, yeah, because he had I think he attributed it afterwards to that clutch issue that they'd had the day before as well, I think. But yeah, it was a weird one, wasn't it?
Yeah, it just kind of went.
Kind of lucky to get at the barriers.
It wasn't like he over-revved the car. It didn't sound. That's what he said. He said he just got on throttle too much on the team radio.
Just a lazy slide.
But it just looked like it just went away from him. But yeah, just style points. Just getting heat into the tyres, as he said after the race.
But yeah, I think Checo ultimately the direction these cars are going to go in, and the style that Max likes, which it makes sense that Red Bull are going to go in that direction, because he is their present, he is their future, he's on course. Like, if he carries on the way he is, he will get to the end of his career recognised as one of the greatest to ever do it. I think the trajectory he's on, and Checo's just going to have to get used to that car. Didn't really like Helmut's comments. I just think, dismissing your drivers and in the way that he speaks as well, it just doesn't really sit right with me. But hopefully Checo can kick on after the break. But not his race, not his last couple of weekends either. It's not been great last couple of races for Checo.
No, but hopefully, he can pick that up. Moving on to, it's Mercedes next, because Ferrari a little bit further down. Lewis Hamilton, George Russell. George got the pole position. Hamilton had the better race. I think, again, we always come to Mercedes, and it's always very difficult, I think, between these two.
It's always race weekend. Tight, isn't it? Yeah. I'm giving it to Lewis still.
I wanted to give it to George. I wanted to go the opposite way. I wanted to give it to George for the pole position.
We could do that.
Qualifying lap. And I don't think he did anything wrong. I just feel like maybe, like you say, fighting too much too early just kind of cost him in the race. And maybe... being on the softs at the end when everybody else is on the mediums gave Lewis the edge. And they were so close to each other. There was a good battle between the two. And I did like that they were allowed to fight each other, because I don't think Lewis ever had the chance to get Verstappen without the virtual safety car at the end. But yeah, I'll go with George for this one, but I can totally accept the other way.
I'm going to say Lewis. I just think it was... super impressive drive, especially considering he had to come back from P7. I just think, there's a lot more things to trip up over when you're starting that far back. So I'm going to give it to Lewis. But yeah, you're right. There's there's compelling arguments both ways. But I'm sure some people will be like, how dare you even consider George to be, or how dare you even think that it was Lewis? It was clearly George.
Hamilton, don't worry, everyone. Failure. He would have got pole position by a minute.
Not everything has to be partisan. Don't worry. But yeah, very close. Which is, again, a good problem for Mercedes, because Lewis is their past and their present. George is very much their present and their future. And I think he's proven that he can take that baton on and carry on running. So good for him.
Yeah, Ferrari next. For me, Sainz had the better qualifying. Charles had the better race. Sainz, I think, just doesn't have maybe he's burning up his tyres too quickly, because he was attacking George the quickest. Like, Leclerc was kind of just sitting off of him for the race at the beginning, and then once Leclerc started to turn up the wick, he was like, right, can we switch round now, because I'm definitely quicker. And Ferrari, I like this tactic from them when they are switching over their drivers, because I think they don't have the bollocks to say... just be strict team orders and be like, Sainz, come on, Leclerc's a lot further ahead in the championship, we got to switch you over. Instead, they go, okay, Sainz, we're going to box you this lap. We're going to box you now so that Leclerc can get the free air and he can get past you. And that's the kind of way they're doing it. But you're just going to screw yourselves over if you get the strategy wrong, which we know Ferrari like to do. So, I think evenly paced again, but then in the second phase, Sainz didn't really have much, but then Leclerc was kind of put on the hard, so it was difficult to tell. I'll give it a Sainz for this one, just because of the quality. I think it was quite even between the two, but I'll give it a Sainz for. Okay,
I'm saying Leclerc, actually, because I think that Leclerc was able to recover. He was struggling with the car you know, in the practice sessions and in qualifying, yet was able to, you know, enact changes to find pace in the race. I think he did have more pace than Car. You know, Leclerc's got more of an excuse because he was stuck on bloody hard tyres. Like, I think Sainz had a more typical strategy and, you know, still should have finished behind Leclerc, even though Leclerc qualified behind. So I'm giving it to Leclerc. So we split the room. But let us know in the comments if you're watching on YouTube. Who's the more impressive driver from the Mercedes and Ferrari pairs? Interesting to know.
Yes, indeed. On to McLaren. And it's a good thing Matt isn't here because I think it's pretty much slam dunk Lando Norris. Ricciardo did kind of get harshly again. They both got put on the hard tyres. I think both McLarens were
Was Lando on hards
at the end. I can quickly have a look because as always, I always have all the data in front of me.
You have a look.
I'm a data merchant.
I'm not convinced, but maybe he was. I think ultimately, you know, both got into Q3, but Daniel didn't. How much do we put that on the tyre choice? He also did punt Lance Stroll and deservedly got a 5-second penalty.
Yeah. How dare he is dead to me in my
books. I mean, yeah, that was just a classic lock-up, you know, getting it overtaken around the outside. Yeah. Stroll gave him plenty of space. Stroll was actually having a really good race as well, so it'd be interesting to see how high he might have finished if it wasn't for that. But yeah, one to forget for Daniel. I mean, regardless of whether or not Lando was on hot, like Lando was clear all weekend. Yeah, great qualifying from Lando, and yeah, Daniel just wasn't able to hang with him. It's all well and good getting into Q3, but when there's still a significant gap in Q3 between you and your teammate, it's not great.
6 tenths. 6 tenths. Ricciardo did have a better lap in Q2, but that would have still been 4 tenths off the pace. So, you know, it's one of those things. Lando just seems to be able to nail it on that one lap, and Ricciardo just struggles. And then it's not even over one lap as well. It's over race pace. Lando, he went backwards, but that's kind of to be expected. He outqualified 2 Red Bulls who had issues, you know, so you're going to be expected to go backwards. And of course, Lewis Hamilton as well. All 3 of those cars are much better than that McLaren. So 7th is the best that they could have possibly done today or yesterday. But yeah, I think Lando, it's just clear, and it's a shame because we take the piss out of Matt a lot. We take the piss out of each other with our favourite drivers. But I do like Ricciardo. He's one of those people that you can't not like, and it's just such a shame to see where he is. Like, he was starting to get things underway with Renault, and then moved to McLaren, and he looked like he started to get the hang of it in McLaren last season. And I think maybe again just because it's a new car, and we've seen it typically over the last few years. When Ricciardo gets a new car, he struggles in the first year to get up to grips with it, whereas Lando just looks like he's comfortable from the off in that new car. And yeah, it's just unfortunate that maybe it's just me bringing excuses, but maybe next season Ricciardo can get a little bit closer to Lando because it's his second season in this car. But yeah, it's just one of those things.
He needs to. He needs to, man, because like you can excuse last year. You know, he's jumping into a car that Lando's got a good understanding of, and it's a very different car to drive to what that Alpine was, or that Renault, as he was in 2020. But yeah, I think next year he has to be on Lando's level, because we know how good Daniel Ricciardo can be. I think Lando Norris is an incredible racing driver, no doubt, but I think there's no excuses for Daniel to not be at least like on Lando's level, as close as, you know, George is to Lewis, for example. There's no excuse. He has to be there. He has to make it work. McLaren have to make it work. Otherwise, it's done a lot of damage to his reputation, which is a shame because, again, you only have to go back a year and a half to 2020, and Daniel's, he had one of the strongest seasons of any driver. Him and Checo were right up there, I thought, in terms of driver of the year candidates, Gasly as well. And yeah, it's just all kind of falling apart, unfortunately. I think he needs his summer break. Yeah,
I mean, he needs longer than a summer break, I think. Alpine up next. Fernando Alonso, Esteban Ocon. Alonso did actually beat Ocon in the end. There was a good battle between the two of them. Ocon out-qualifying Alonso, which I was quite happily surprised with, because I always, I think it's just quite clear to see that Alonso is the better driver. Ocon is one of your favourites, so you're defend him a bit more than maybe some others. But I think, like I say, Fernando Alonso is just one of those elites. Like him, Verstappen, Leclerc, Verstappen, and Hamilton. You can put them in the top three. Just like they will fight for a championship in the right car. If it was all equal cars, it'll be between those three for a championship. Ocon, though, decent job and a good job in the race because I think they were quite evenly paced. Yeah, there was maybe a few battles too much. I'm going to give it to Alonso just because I think those battles just lost positions, and the team, obviously, if you're looking at it from a team's aspect, you're just not going to be happy. But I think it's very close between the two of them. You could easily go either way.
And that's why I think I defend Ocon because, I agree that Alonso is still on an incredibly high level and I agree that he's still one of the best drivers in Formula One. So for Ocon to be so close is, like Ocon's not had it easy with teammates. Sergio Perez, Daniel Ricciardo, good Daniel Ricciardo as well. And now Fernando Alonso. He's not had it easy with teammates. Yes, he's never beaten a teammate. But when you're against those caliber teammates in your F1 career, that's a huge ask. And for him to be as close as he is, I think he doesn't get enough credit for being as close as he is to Fernando. But granted, I agree. I think Fernando's been quicker over the course of this season. And yeah, as much as Ocon did out-qualify Alonso, actually, Alonso's Q2 lap was quicker than his Q3 lap. So Alonso definitely had the pace there. He just wasn't able to hook it up in Q3. So credit to Ocon for that. But yeah, I do... Again, from a racing point of view, I didn't have too much of an issue with Ocon's defences, but when it's your teammate, I do think that context matters, and it did potentially. Ocon almost got caught by Seb at the end as well. It's like literally 0.1 of a second. Yeah. So I think it's more on the hard tyre that saw the Alpines kind of falling. Yeah. But again, Lando was best shot going to get P7. The Alpines, their best results were going to be P8 and 9, probably. Like if they didn't jump Lando at the start, which they didn't because they were battling, and maybe Ocon was defending a bit too hard. So I'm also going to give it to Fernando Alonso. He finished ahead of his teammate, and again, I think Ocon's defense was it wasn't bad. It just wasn't necessary in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it would be fine because we look at last week between the two Astons. Both of them were fighting, but they weren't losing a position from it. I think when it comes to losing a position to another team, then it's questionable. But if it's just you two fighting for one position, there's no one around you, go for it. Defend as hard as you want within the rules and don't punt each other off. On to the Aston Martins. Sebastian Vettel, Lance Stroll. I think this one's quite closer than it seems. Lance did the better job in qualifying. Vettel beat him in the race. But both of them, I think, did have damage because obviously Vettel got hit from Albon at the start, and some damage must have happened from there. I haven't seen any other views other than the onboard from Vettel, and same with the one from Lance Stroll. I haven't seen any other views other than the onboard from Stroll. So both of them surely had damage. I think it definitely cost Stroll at the end because Vettel was clear. They switched over, unless they just couldn't make the softs last that long in the Aston as well. But Vettel just ran clear at the end. It was 8 seconds, the gap between the two of them. Whereas Lance had him at a 4-second gap for most of the race. And then it sort of came back. But I think just promising from both Aston Martins that they are on the cusp of points. I think whereas going back 3 weeks ago, they were the worst car after Williams brought those upgrades to Britain. I think they were the worst car on the grid. Now I'd say they are above AlphaTauri and Williams. And they're just sort of flirting with Haas and Alpha. Haas and Alpha just sort of yo-yo. Some tracks they're good, some tracks they're bad. And I think Aston, what we've seen recently, they have been consistently at that, just off the cusp of P10. Don't know whether we'll go to other tracks. Maybe they will also become a yo-yo team. But it's good signs from them. It's just it's just rock, paper, scissors for who will get the final point in the race between Vettel and Stroll.
Well, so who are you giving the head-to-head to?
I'm going to give it to Stroll because got back my boy. He had a good race. He got hit, but I think can go either way.
You know what?
Better qualifying as well.
Lance out qualified Seb, which he deserves a good chunk of credit for. I think he definitely loses a lot more time because he's like fully spun out by Ricciardo. Seb does have contact. I don't know how much damage there is, how that, impacts the performance of his car. But I think given how much, how good Lance's result could have been if he doesn't get punted by Ricciardo. I think he does finish ahead of Vettel. So I'm actually going to give it to Stroll as well. As much as I think Seb had a great drive, 18 to P10, I think actually in terms of quality of performance, yeah, I'm going to give it to Stroll. Not much in it once again. Seb, great drive. But I'm just going to... I think Stroll just about edged it in impressiveness to me.
Just showing how good Stroll is up against a 4-time world champion. So he should easily smoke a 2-time world champion next season.
Oh dear, you're in for a fun time next year, Hayden.
Yeah, there's just depression non-stop. Right, AlphaTauri, we've got Gasly. Yuki Tsunoda, just a race to forget. Honestly, had the spin.
Awful.
Yeah, awful race. Should have just not shown up, in all honesty.
Gasly was actually really happy after the race. Like, even though he didn't get into the points, he was like, yeah, look, we started in the pit lane, started right at the back, and to come through to P12. And yeah, Yuki just going backwards, man. Like, he had a really lazy spin, didn't he, on the chicane as well, on the soft tyres, so you can't even use the hard tyre excuse for that. And I think, Tsunoda's still got a big mistake in him, no doubt. I think that raw pace is there. He out-qualified Gasly, didn't he? Gasly went out in Q1.
I can have a look for you. Yes, because Gasly had his lap time deleted. Gasly had his lap time deleted. Both out in Q1, though.
I think they both went out.
Was going to get through, but he had his lap time deleted, and that allowed Stroll to get through.
I mean, if you get your lap time, you deleted. You get your lap time deleted,
as
long as it's correctly deleted. As long as it's correctly deleted. I think that it's clearly Gasly. Yuki had a bit of a shocker, bless him.
Yeah, I think Yuki's impressed because he's definitely closed up the gap. I don't think because Gasly was like being one of the best drivers the last 2 seasons. I think the AlphaTauri's been a bit crap this year, and Gasly hasn't become a worse driver. It's just Yuki's become a better driver, closed up that gap. But because he's still got those mistakes in him, Gasly is still able to shine in that difference. I want to see if you noticed this as well, actually. Just before the race start, when they panned to Gasly in the pit lane, did you see the shot that they had of Gasly? It looked like it was out of a movie. It was like the weirdest shot I think I've seen. It was just like, it just looked like it was post and it had been edited. It was just so weird. And I just thought that maybe it would have caught your eye. It caught my eye. And I was just like, okay, what is this? Moving on, okay.
You need to find it and post. I'll find it on Twitter.
I'll find it for you. Right, Alfa Romeo. Bottas obviously having the DNF at the end. I think he was running ahead of Zhou, and I believe he actually out-qualified Zhou as... Yes, he did.
He was running in the points, wasn't he?
But yeah, Bottas got into... Yeah, and then he got overtaken by Stroll and Vettel because he was on the hard, so he did that hard strategy as well. I think just the gamble of like... I don't think they thought that they were going to be a top 10 runner, so they were like, okay, we'll do one less stop to try and get ourselves in there. And it worked for the majority of the race. Just at the end, it just kind of dropped away from them, like the hards did for everybody else. So, yeah, I think for me, Bottas, this one, it's good to see Zhou again getting it into Q2 and nearly into Q3. The Alfa Romeo, again, I think this was a track that... I think this was a middle ground for them. It wasn't necessarily a track where they were awful at, just not a track where they're, fighting for those top 7 to 8, average 9 positions. So I think it was just like an average track for them. I don't think they could have done any better. Bottas, unfortunately, with the DNF, but it wouldn't have made any difference because if you finish 11th, as Lance Stroll did, you might as well finish last. It makes no difference to anybody. So yeah, I think Bottas for this one. But again, good for my boy Zhou to be showing some good pace again.
Yeah, Joe did a good job. But yeah, it has to be Valtteri into Q3 ahead of his teammate until the car blows up. Still don't know what that issue was. I'm assuming it's Ferrari power unit related because they're always going bang.
Car's been Alfa Romeo because they've had terrible reliability this season.
They are awfully unreliable. And look, it was just a bit of a... We didn't really see much of the Alphas, did we, during the race? Like, they weren't high enough to get on the cameras. They weren't low enough and having enough scraps to really get much airtime. So, Valtteri Bottas, I think all in all, that car, started the season really well. I think he's still got more points than Alonso as well, which is quite a stat when you think about it. Double check. I'm pretty sure he does.
5 points more, 46 to 41.
5 more. Which is crazy when you look at how good Fernando's performances have been and how quick that Alpine is. So he capitalised early on when they were, but they do seem to have not stepped forward. But it was better this race. I think that's why Joe was so relieved after qualifying. Even though he went out in Q2, he was just like, guys, we've actually like got some pace for the first time in quite a few weeks. So it's kind of promising. You want that. That's some good momentum to carry into the summer break rather than being really rubbish and just being sad all summer. So
yeah, you don't want to see it sort of like the car just because they had a good car at the start of the season, but you don't want to see them just like dropping away and then going back to being a back marker because it was promising at the start of the season that Alfa and Haas can fight. And we'll get on to Haas now. Mick Schumacher versus Kevin Magnussen. Magnussen out qualified. And I think he got the meatball flag as well because his front wing was broken, but it wasn't fully broken. It was just flapping around. And if it's fully broken, they can carry on. But if it's moving, they have to come in and replace it. So he had to do that front wing change, an extra pit stop. I don't know the lap times because I've only got that they were a lap down. I don't have the difference between the gaps between Schumacher and Magnussen. But there was only 2 positions in it. I think I'm going to give this one to Magnussen. Whilst Mick Schumacher did beat him, Magnussen out-qualified, and he got the front wing damage. But I haven't seen how that front wing damage happened. So if it was Magnussen's fault, then, that's on him.
Yeah. I'm going to give it to Schumacher because Schumacher made up loads of positions at the start. I think he was running in like P9 or something, P10, around that kind of area, considering where he qualified. He qualified P15, I think it was, wasn't it? And like, considering where he qualified, he seemingly had a really strong start to the race. I think he went on the hard tyres. Again, it's one of them that because not everyone was on the same strategy. It's hard, straight off of memory, like with other races when typically you're going to be on a certain tyre at a certain time. I think again we'll never know how good Magnussen's race could have been if he didn't get the black and orange flag. So. But I'm gonna, from what I feel like I saw, but this isn't backed by data. This is just memory vibes. I'm gonna give it Schumacher.
Backed by memory vibes, memory vibe merchant and a data merchant. We have
highlight merchant,
the last team, highlight merchant. Yeah, true. Ooh. I actually watched the race this time.
Well done,
people watching.
Well done.
I wasn't on a plane. Right, Williams, Albon versus Latifi. Are you going to give it to Latifi again? Despite Albon beating him?
Well, that's not the only metric, is it, that we decide these things? So Latifi, purple first sector in Q1 before he bottles his lap. What the hell was that? What's going on?
I think what happened is Latifi was, for some reason, there was a setting on the Williams car that they like to turn the wick down on Latifi because he is the GOAT. Like, he's the best driver we've ever seen. So he was able to finally show his true pace in FP3. And then in qualifying, he went purple and they were like, guys, we can't have this. Like, we can't have Latifi showing how good he actually is. So they turned the car back down halfway through the lap.
I thought you were going to give a genuine theory.
It is genuine. That's what happened. GOAT Tifi, right, is the best driver we've ever seen. But there's just such an agenda against him that we will never get to see it because Williams just turned the car down.
Okay, Hayden. Look, I think that it was a crying shame that he bottled that lap because he's on for Q2 if he doesn't mess up that final corner. I affirmed he was like 3.5 tenths off, and he definitely loses more than 3.5 tenths in that final corner. So I don't know, maybe he took too much out of the tyre at the start. So that was a shame. Obviously, Albon has his coming together with Vettel. I haven't seen other angles. If that's on Albon, if that incident's on Albon, then he still finished ahead of Latifi. But then they both had the same number of pit stops. I don't know what the gap was at the end. I'm gonna give it to Albon because he was ahead, and Latifi had the opportunity and bottled it at the end of the day in qualifying, and that is on him. So I'm going to give it to Albon. He still managed to finish ahead of Latifi in the race. And just not there was a full storm with this upgrade for Williams, it seems. And they've just kind of, whether they're struggling to understand it or what, I don't know. I mean, look, Latifi finished ahead of Tsunoda. They both finished ahead of Tsunoda. So there's that, I guess. But Not much to be excited about, unfortunately, as an Albon fan right now. But hey, I mean, he's still. Yeah, I think Latifi has closed that gap last couple of races. It'd just be interesting to see if he can keep it up for the rest of the season, because I think Latifi's driving for his F1 future. I think if he doesn't, if he's not consistently much closer to Albon than he's been so far this season, then I think that seat's got Sargent potentially, or whoever wins F2, maybe again Porsche, Drogovic, written all over it.
Yeah, indeed. It'd be interesting to see over future races because they look really good in Silverstone. Unfortunately, the rain came down to not really show that, and I think the upgrade was good that they brought there. So it'd be interesting to see at other circuits. Maybe France and Hungary just hasn't suited the style of car that they've got. So maybe going to a different track, they can, go a little bit quicker and see what they can do there. But yeah, it's just a bit of a shame for them. Maybe just because of that damage, Albon could have been further up through the field, because we've seen him quite a few times where he's been fighting just outside the points. We have a similar trajectory between our two drivers where they just seem to like to get 11th place quite a lot.
We do.
No points to show for it.
There's only a point between them.
Yeah, we just have to say they've had a good race. Everyone's like, yeah, sure they did. Where's their point? But I will give this one to Albon. I think, even if the incident is on him, he still beat Latifi from having to take that front wing an earlier pit stop, regardless of whether he did it or they had the same pit stops. He still had to go earlier than Latifi. So yeah, Albon for me on that one, and that's going to wrap up this Hungarian Grand Prix review and Fernando Alonso reaction review, which I'm still awaiting to go on Twitter and find out it's a meme account. It's not the real account. I still don't believe it. But thank you very much.
It's like a full hack.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a full hack. It's the Twitter and Aston Martin's actual website as well. It's a full concerted attack on Aston Martin. Speculative conjecture, Hayden. That's what it is.
Indeed. Yeah, that's going to wrap up today's episode of the podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to the Talking Points channel so you never have to miss one of these podcasts that happen every single week. And if you're listening to us over on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or any other one of those, make sure you follow us and give us a rating on there as well. We will see you next time. It's now the summer break. Any plans, Tomo?
Work hard, play hard, mate. Videos.
Work hard,
videos. Banging out the videos, mate.
I'm going to see what F1 highlights I can watch in the off summer, and then come back with some incredible knowledge. But yeah, we'll see you on the next one. Goodbye, everyone.